Hello, I'm Ellen McGrattan, Director of the Heller-Hurwicz Economics Institute. The mission of the Institute is to inform and influence public policy. We do this by supporting frontier economic research and communicating the findings to leading academics, policymakers, and business executives around the world. Today, I want to introduce you to some of the supporting cast in this mission, the undergraduate research assistants. For many of them, it is a first venture into the day-to-day work of economic research. Our hope is that these experiences will prepare them for future careers, whether they work in business, government, or academia. Before turning it over to the students, let me say that fulfilling the mission would not be possible without the generous support of our donors. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jackson Mejia, and I'm a research assistant for Anmal Bandari and Ellen McGrattan. I'm a graduating senior, and I'm going to work as a consultant at Accenture following graduation. While I chose not to take the research path, this experience proved invaluable to me nevertheless because it required me to learn on my own and sharpen analytical and practical skills that I would not have had otherwise. Now I'd like to give a brief example of one thing I worked on, which is the relationship between the 2017 corporate tax cut and investment. While theory predicts that the tax cut would have a substantial effect on investment following its implementation, we do not see that in practice. Note here in this figure the percentage change in investment over time. From over year to year, it's usually around 5%, except around recessionary periods where it can be much lower. Now, I'd like to zoom in on the 2016 to 2019 growth in investment over time, which is the one relevant for the tax cut years. Observe that there is that while this blue line, which is actual investment, was strong prior to 2017 implementation. After that, it went down substantially, which we already knew going into the project. So why could this be? Well, one explanation that we came up with is that this is partially because while the law brought about a cut in the statutory rate of 14 percentage points for corporations, we found that the actual cut was much smaller. Using firm level 10K filings from the SEC, we found that the cut in the effective tax rate was actually more like 4 to 5 points, something which could easily get lost amidst policy uncertainty and a trade war. Now, professors at the University of Minnesota and HHEI allow undergraduates to answer questions like these, something which has been really valuable for me and will be valuable in the future.
Hi, my name is Sam Jordan Wood, and I'm a research assistant through HHEI for Professors Ellen McGrattan and Anmal Bandari. What I've been doing while working with them is looking into the decline of business ownership in the US. How I've been doing this is I downloaded the Survey of Income and Program Participation dataset from the US Census Bureau, and I've been using that to look into business owner characteristics and paid employment characteristics and how they've changed in the last 10 to 15 years. If you're interested in hearing more about my research and the research of my peers, I encourage you to log on to our Zoom May 13th at noon, and you can hear more about not only my research, but the great research being done by my fellow HHEI research assistants. Looking forward to seeing you then.
So for Professor Mullins, I'm Alex, and I worked with Nikhil, and we collected data on welfare experiments ran in the 1990s in the US across different states prior to Bill Clinton's welfare reform. And what we did is we collected a bunch of data, and we wanted to answer the question, what are the effects of welfare policy and these natural variation in policy on child outcomes, on different levels of child achievement, on different measures of child development. And Nikhil and I collected the data, and what Professor Mullins did was he developed what he called a structural meta-analysis, which sort of aimed to provide a unified sort of statistical framework to aggregate, differences in how experiments, implement differences in demographics across different experiments. And what we ultimately came up with was a model that we could run counterfactuals on and, answer in a rigorous sense what are, is the impact of work requirements or of extra, higher amounts of welfare on a child's achievement. Nikhil now will give you a bit more information on the analysis itself.
Hi, my name is Nikhil Saxena, and I worked with Alex Janin and Professor Joseph Mullins on his work on child development outcomes and different welfare-to-work strategies. In this slide here, we can see some of the counterfactuals that Professor Mullins was able to establish from our structured meta-analysis. You can see that an increase in income has a generally positive effect on child academic outcomes, but a work requirement is not necessarily negative or positive. This is a slight contradiction to past findings because it contradicts the idea that maternal employment has negative effects on child development outcomes. Now, none of our results were extremely statistically significant because we were doing a structural meta-analysis using just average treatment results, which we pulled from various reports of these different trials. But recently, we were able to get a hold of microdata from the MDRC, and we've started cleaning and reformatting that for analysis. Using that data, we can incorporate more heterogeneity from within and between these sites, which will allow us to determine which results are the most statistically significant and should be used to inform future policy decisions. Through this experience, we learned a lot about developing economic models and working with difficult data. And I think most importantly, the adaptability that's required when working in academic research.
My name is Cameron Brumman, and I'm a current senior at the University of Minnesota. I'm also an undergraduate research assistant for Kurt Winkleman and Jordan Pandolfo, and we look at public pension reform together. Currently, those two are working on an academic paper that takes a life cycle model and looks at proposed public pension reform. And using that life cycle model, they're able to look at projected welfare impacts on both public and private workers due to the public pension reform. I've been working with those two since November 2019, and although our time together has been pretty brief, I've gotten some important experience in both Python and Excel. For instance, my first project, I took data from the public plans database, and the database provided actuarial assets percentage paid in for all public plans in all 50 states from 2001 to 2018. And using a Python program, I was able to create weights based on those assets and eventually calculate individual arc and eventually state arc, which is the sum of those individual arcs. And basically that's the state's arc from 2001 to 2018, as well as the mean and standard deviation over those 18 years. I've also gotten to work on a cool Excel project for Pew Research Center. This project basically highlights the difference in choice of discount rates and how states are kind of incentivized to choose a higher discount rate for their public pensions. This was all brand new to me. I had never taken a financial econ course, but thanks to Kurt, I was able to learn a lot. And basically these spreadsheets show the difference in present value of liabilities, calculation for duration, and how there's a percentage off when you use duration calculation for the present value of liabilities, as well as an amount to be amortized over amortization period, which in this case was 30 years. Recently, I've just been doing some data collection for Kurt and Jordan. This is just data collected from the public pension database. Being an undergraduate research assistant has been an amazing experience for me. I've gotten to learn a lot more about research, and I've gotten to talk with people who have gone through grad school and a PhD program, and they've been able to offer me helpful advice. It's kind of confirmed that I want to go to grad school, whether for a PhD or not, I don't know. But this experience has helped me both with Excel and Python, but also just a great learning experience about what research is and how grad school works. And if anyone is remotely interested in both research and grad school, it is an awesome experience and one that I would highly recommend.
Hi, I'm Trung. I'm currently a research assistant for Professor Thomas Holmes in the economics department. I was granted the opportunity to work for Professor Holmes at the beginning of fall 2019 semester. I want to share with you my experience as a research assistant. This experience is invaluable for me, where I can participate in economics research for the first time as an undergraduate student. My main job as an RA is to collect and process data that can be used to support Professor Holmes' research. In the past few months, I was involved in various projects that required the use of certain tools and programming skills to acquire available data on the internet. For example, when I was collecting data for Professor Holmes' research on zoning policies in different areas in the US, I had to use the Google geocoding API along with Python to convert physical addresses to geographic coordinates. This would help the process of data analysis to become more systematic and methodical. The experience as a research assistant is a great opportunity for me to learn new programming languages. Most undergraduate students in the economics department might have heard of popular languages and softwares such as Python, R, or even Stata. So aside from Python, I also got to know how to use SAS, which is another software that is powerful and quite easy to learn. The knowledge in different programming languages and data analysis softwares, I believe, would give me an advantage in many working environments, and is also very helpful in economic research. Most importantly, this experience has shaped my interest in becoming an economist who can explore and try to tackle many different issues in economics and their policy implication.
Hello, my name is Benjamin Caswell, and I'm a researcher at the Heller-Hurwicz Economics Institute here at the University of Minnesota. I'm a junior studying economics and music. I was asked to become a research assistant through the Institute's undergraduate research program in July of 2019. I was paired with Professor Jeremy Leese and his project investigating the effects of the 2017 Minneapolis minimum wage increase. He asked me to create a database of every minimum wage law that has been passed in the history of the United States, both federal, state, and local. Professor Leese not only wanted the regular minimum wages, like the federal $7.25, but also all sub-minimum wages, like the $2.13 tipped wage. He gave me detailed specifications on what data he wanted for each law and what level of documentation was necessary. I decided to start with the local laws. I quickly found a database compiled by researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, of all effective city and county minimum wage laws. This was an incredible starting point, and after a bit more research, I am now fairly confident my local law database is complete, or it will be at least until new cities pass minimum wages. The federal minimum wage has been researched intensively, and I was able to document its history fairly quickly. I finally moved on to state minimum wages, for which I couldn't find much previous research. I eventually figured out that if I could find the modification history for current state laws, and then the text of those modifications, I could piece together the state histories. I eventually found databases that have this information for most states, though there are still some gaps in my state wages. To fill in these gaps, I started reaching out to various state departments of labor as well as historical societies and law libraries. Unfortunately, due to the coronavirus epidemic, most of these institutions are now closed. I hope to continue my work once they reopen. This experience has taught me patience and resourcefulness. I spent hours trying to find the documentation I needed for each state's history. I have a more complete sense of what being an economics researcher would be like, and that's been really useful information for determining my future path. Even with its gaps, I believe my database is one of the most complete documentations of American minimum wage laws ever built. I am proud of the work I have done, and once it is complete, with Professor Leese's permission, I hope to make it available to both researchers and the general public. I'm extremely grateful for the Heller-Hurwicz Economics Institute for this opportunity. Thank you all so much.
Hi everyone, my name is Esma, and I've been working with faculty member Hannes Malmberg for the past year within the Heller-Hurwicz department. In this video, I'll be talking a little bit about my research experience, some of the questions that we are exploring, and how my data collection will help answer those questions and how we went about collecting this data. Before we get into our hypothesis and research, I just want to highlight some key information. During 20th century, there has been a massive increase in schooling, a decrease in fertility rate, and decrease in mortality rates. It is observed that some of these trends are driven by increase in average income, but we also factor in that the social outcomes improve faster than would be predicted by income alone. We can see this by the fact that poor or developing countries today have higher schooling, lower infant mortality rate, and lower fertility rates than when rich countries were at comparable income levels. One hypothesis is that the disconnection between income and social measures is that government policy shifted towards prioritizing social services higher in the developing world. These shifts reflected both newly independent nations' willingness to invest more in their own populations, as well as the need for colonial powers to build legitimacy. So my work has been to document how spending on education evolved in African colonies prior to independence. Publicly available data starts in 1950, but we are interested in finding how much spending increased prior to this. Some countries of our interest are Gold Coast or Ghana, Kenya, Malawi, Uganda, Tanzania, and Nigeria. The data that exists within British archives is within the form of handwritten or often printed books dated back to the 1800s with information on education, such as enrollment, gender of the students enrolled, school fees, expenses, and the contribution of government versus missionaries. Along with education data, I helped collect data within expenditure and revenue reports from the books as well, which detailed figures on education expenses as compared to other governmental expenses. The process of getting this data readable and of use to us was long and very detail-oriented. The books have other information besides education and expenditure, so I would find the relevant pages and download copies of those. Initially, I made samples of what an ideal Excel spreadsheet would look like with data that can be transported to another statistical software for further analyses. Since then, my work has been largely focused on supervising a team of freelancers who extract the data and copy it to Excel. Once we get it on Excel, I scan and check it for consistency and ensure it's all making sense together. The format of the books changes by year and country pretty drastically, so I have to adapt and give new instruction and feedback pretty frequently. I've really enjoyed exploring data and information that isn't traditionally found online and is in its rawest form. This has been a pretty new experience for me and has also served as a great leadership role within this research assistant position. I have always enjoyed partaking in projects that demand attention to detail and digging through layers of information to find what we need, and this project has been exactly that for me.